I feel like I have been running a race. I literally got to Albuquerque from being gone almost a week at Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, where I spoke about Spartan 1 and Spartan 2 and Spartan 1's trip to Antarctica in 2003. And it was only in the last hour or so that I heard that some people are questioning, as he said in the video back in July when we did the backlighted video, that he had had the rank of first lieutenant. I was able, just in the last 10 minutes, to get a hold of him, and he said, quote unquote, "Oh, Linda, I am sorry. I must have been nervous. When I went to Antarctica in 2003, my rank in the United States Navy was lieutenant commander, and I retired as a commander." And so I'm trying to set the record straight from his own lips tonight at the end of February. And again, he apologizes. I know how people can be extremely nervous, even if it's me behind a camera and we are doing it sort of backlighted. There still is a lot of stress with people who are trying to help us understand other truths and other facts that are hidden by policies of denial. And in this case, I know it was a very nervous day for all of us back in July of 2018. So now, starting in February of 2019 going forward, we will officially correct the titles in the videos as we are unfolding. And I think that what I'd like to say is that at Conscious Life Expo last Saturday, the room that I was in for the Whistleblower presentation, it was packed. And people were saying, I will purchase tickets and sit on the floor, and the floor was covered. There were a lot of people, and there were some military. And for the most part, outside of this question about his saying first lieutenant when he meant lieutenant commander, everyone who has had a military background and who has seen the part 1 and part 2 of what I hope will be a total of 6 by the summer, and with 4 more to unfold, everyone is basically saying, Linda, this is really important. And some people are saying, I know that this is information that reinforces pieces that they have heard. So for those of you who have been in my Earthfiles YouTube audience for quite a while, this is an exciting moment because I feel like I am breaking some new ground with Spartan 1 and Spartan 2. And I want to report that in answer to a week ago on our last YouTube when I showed for the first time part 1 and part 2 together, and I said that let's try to go for 100,000 subscribers. It would thrill me to get to that number. And Lori told me, getting back from the airport today, that we are 90,000 and something. So maybe tonight, if everybody talks with somebody, maybe we can push this needle and get over, or get to 100,000 and then go over in the next week or two. It would be thrilling because for me, all of this hard, nervous-wracking work having to do with trying to get information about what is really the facts down in Antarctica under the ice. It is difficult, it is expensive, it is something I care tremendously about in trying to keep bringing it to you no matter what. And doing the subscriptions, it really does help. So with that, and almost like a cheer, that I was able to talk directly, briefly, with Spartan 1 to clarify so that all of you can take that confusion and be able to tell everybody else, no, he is confirmed with Linda, and we will be going forward and further setting the record. Lieutenant commander and retired as a commander in the Navy as a SEAL commander. Now, after the presentation to as many people as they could get into that room at Conscious Life Expo in the LAX Hilton, it was a couple of days later that I shared with an audience a story that those of you who have been with me on the Earthfiles YouTube channel going back into October of 2018, you heard about the strange wispy, smoky fog that came through my window up the bookshelf. And what I shared in Los Angeles, I wanted to share with you tonight. It begins with some research that I have been doing about out-of-bodies. And then I'm going to share with you just 3 or 4, but they are heartfelt letters that seem to me to represent. I have at least 500 letters in multiple folders that I have gotten from people all over the world, literally. And so many of the letters start out, Linda, I have never told anyone this before, not my parents, not my spouse, not my siblings. These are incredible in the sense of what people are holding inside of themselves, that, as I have said here at the YouTube channel, I hope that we can all continue the inertia of sharing with each other what we really are haunted by or exhilarated by or have had experiences that we have not talked with people. And so I'm going to start tonight in terms of some research information that I have learned about this whole issue of childhood out of body, the mystery of it starting very young and continuing in some lives into adulthood and beyond. Here is a fascinating piece that fits into some of the questions that we all have raised with each other since October. And this is from Science Daily, a very reputable news organization. And this is going back 12 years ago to March of 2007. This is the quote. More than 13,000 Europeans, almost 6% of the total population, have had an out-of-body experience in a formal study. Dr. Kevin Nelson and a research team at the University of Kentucky have studied the link between out-of-body experiences, the sleep-awake transition, and near-death experiences, and they have published in the journal Neurology. Their study showed that some human bodies might be, quote, predisposed to these sorts of experiences. They found that an out-of-body experience is statistically as likely to occur during a near-death experience as it is to occur during the transition between wakefulness and sleep, that the process is so similar. Dr. Nelson said, quote, we found it surprising that out-of-body experience with sleep transition seemed so very much like out-of-body experience during near-death, close quote. Further, the researchers found there is, quote, a strong association of sleep paralysis with out-of-body experiences in the near-death experience phenomenon. Said Dr. Nelson, quote, that is curious and unexplained, close quote. Now, 2 years ago, on July 19th, 2017, the journal Medical News Today headlined, quote, out-of-body experiences, neuroscience, or the paranormal. And the article began, quote, as you lie in slumber, your spirit body snaps free and drifts upward while your physical shell is left lonely on the bed below, connected only by a fragile, silvery cord. You turn and observe yourself peacefully sleeping. Could this be evidence of the soul? Could this be proof of life after death? Close quote. No one knows what causes out of body, especially in children around age 5 to 6. As I have talked before in the fall, after that wispy material came through and in and around, I think I had mentioned this even before, it has happened to me over and over when I was 6 years old, going to bed most every night. I would lay down on my back with my head on my pillow, and first I would try to see infinity. That started because my mom and dad had a book about Albert Einstein, the physicist. Dad had taught me to read early, and there was something about Einstein that I wanted to know more about, even though, as a young child, I didn't understand a lot of the book, but my child's mind was set on fire about the idea of infinity going on forever. So that's why at bedtime I began trying to imagine infinity. I would see a gray landscape against a black background, and I would keep expanding the gray landscape in my mind, trying to reach the end of the gray. I actually broke out into a sweat sometimes, my nightgown getting with perspiration, trying to visualize infinity as a young child. And then I would wait for a very specific feeling as if I suddenly became weightless. Then I would separate in two, fully conscious and looking forward to what was coming next. I knew that my solid self was still lying on the bed with my head on the pillow, but the other part was rising up toward the white cottage cheese ceiling that my mom and dad had sprayed in my bedroom. And I always felt the same wonder and excitement when I saw the blue light glowing around each of those cottage cheese kernels in the ceiling. That color was like the blue stripe on a neon tetra fish. I was fascinated with that blue light, and I wanted to get closer to it, to touch it, to enter into it. But every time I would get close to the ceiling, a thought voice in my mind telepathically would warn, no, danger, you cannot go through the ceiling. And then I would always find myself instantly back in my body. But instead of lying down with my head on my pillow, I was always sitting straight up, and I had my fingers wrapped around my thumbs of both hands like this. And next, I would lie back down where I started with my head on my pillow and quickly go right to sleep. And when I think back to that phenomenon at such an early age, just beginning grade school, it puzzles me that I never talked about this with my parents or brother or friends growing up, and I do not know why not. In fact, I did not talk about this going out of body as a young child until just the past couple of years. In fact, the first time that I ventured outward to a large audience was my Earthfiles YouTube channel broadcast on September 12th, 2018. Because of my own out-of-body experiences as a young child and never talking about them, I finally have reached a point where it feels important to me now to ask my fellow humans about phenomena such as out-of-body travel, especially at a young age when no parents or teachers have been involved. And that implies the experience of splitting in two could be some primal process of soul growth in the evolution of conscious, intelligent life. I wonder if children going out of body is evidence that the soul is an active, vibrant recorder and teacher in us, even if the Western world today sometimes dismisses the soul as something only esoteric and not real, like a piece of meat in this matter world. I think when I was 6 years old that I knew intuitively I would be criticized and made fun of by other people if I talked about splitting in two, with one part of me rising up to the ceiling and then being blocked by an unseen warning voice not to go through the ceiling because it could be dangerous. I think the social, political, and religious unacceptable parts of human culture just seep into us when we are young, and that seepage brings silence about a lot of subjects. But that same warning voice has been with me my entire life, protecting me always. And I trust that voice. I venture that it comes from a relationship between what I call the divine field and my soul, your soul, all souls. And that if we knew all the truth of the big picture, the divine field is the source for all the matter worlds, no matter how many universes, and for all the dimensions, no matter how many dimensions. And I'm also convinced that the truth is we are a mind in a container body that encases an eternal evolving soul that cycles through all kinds of life, and that concept of infinity, eternity, is part of the matrix of this incredible cosmos that I think starts with the divine field that is outside of matter. What my revolutions around the sun in this life cycle have reinforced for me is that something else beyond us humans seems that it does not want us to know about or to even understand the unique power and relationship that our Homo sapiens sapient souls have to a divine field. And that's why a year ago on November 8th, 2017, when I did my very first Earthfiles YouTube channel broadcast, finally I felt that I could open up myself with all of you and reach out through the YouTube channel and talk with you about my own traveling out of my body as a child. And that I was posing these questions. Do you remember going out of body? And what dreams have haunted you in your life? Why does a dark room scare many people? And what does go bump in the night all over planet Earth, keeping humans dumb and blind while other forces harvest our haunted world? Since then, on most Wednesday evenings, beginning at 7:30 p.m. Mountain and in all the other time zones around the country and the world, I have been in my office, like now, coming right off of an airplane only a couple of hours ago, to share news and receive questions from you, the Earthfiles YouTube audience that has grown so much in the past year, and I am so grateful for. At the beginning of most of these broadcasts, I have had one or both of my Himalayan long-haired cats, Fluffy and Chocolate, to celebrate the joy of having loving, precious life and rejecting irrational violence and death on this planet. And this photo was taken in September of 2018 when I asked the YouTube audience if anyone had young childhood memories of floating out of body. And now I have at least 500 letters, and so many begin, I've never told anyone before. And I want for this new and expanding audience to just return for a brief few minutes to what happened that night, the first time I was talking about my out-of-body experience when I was age 6. And that none of us knew that night of October 3rd, 2018, that a very sharp-eyed viewer who was watching saw something moving rapidly behind me at exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds after I had begun that broadcast on October 3rd, 2018, for the live stream starting at 7:30 p.m. Mountain. The next morning on October 4th, Lori and I and Brad, we gathered some of what we saw in that video and other observations, and we posted this. There was a 1-second puzzle during my Earthfiles YouTube channel live streaming podcast on Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. I began live at 7:30 p.m. Mountain from my Albuquerque, New Mexico office. The puzzle occurred 2 minutes and 32 seconds later into my live streaming YouTube broadcast. I had no awareness of anything unusual. It was not until the next morning on Thursday, October 4th, 2018, that Lori Moriarty emailed me, quote, "A fan called attention to something in your video. I would like to put it out to your experts to review. Here is an image from the video mystery and the short video segment that I slowed down 1/4 speed," close quote. My first reaction was it must be an insect blurred in the video process. But the more I replayed it, the stranger it became. The puzzle looks like a piece of fog moving through one of my second-story office windows, briefly brightening a white-painted wood bookshelf, and then rising straight up at a 90-degree angle. All of this takes place within 1 second, from 2:32 to 2:33 in my Earthfiles YouTube channel videotape made directly from the live stream. I sent the slowed-down video to a trusted Photoshop and video analyst who requests anonymity. I also sent it to author Whitley Strieber. The analyst wanted to see the original video, and we sent it to him and to Whitley. The analyst looped the rapidly moving substance 20 times in close-up of the rapidly moving puzzle that both men conclude is anomalous. A few days later, another Earthfiles viewer sent me this email. "I looked at your recent video of the 1-second puzzle, and I did some image processing to eliminate everything in the images except for the puzzle. I have attached a GIF of the results. The thing that flew through your studio had some interesting structure. To me, it looks like 4 dots about the same size, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and that they are following the same track, and then they seem to gradually diverge. So I do not know what that is, but it is not a puff of smoke." Signed, Michael. And here is his enlarged video of this puzzling piece of moving fog that seems now to almost have real substance to it as it repeats in this moving GIF. And this was coming through the back window up the bookshelves on October 3rd, 2018. Now, as you look at that and know that everybody who has seen it, including people who are professional Photoshop viewing analysts, they say this is an extraordinary tape of something they don't understand. And at least it remains a puzzle and a mystery. Well, now, a lot of viewers from around the world, they emailed me with these experiences that they had with meditation and prayer experience. And they said that the pale whitish gray substance was possibly the return of someone in my family or a beloved pet after death, and was a positive event, like this email from E. Macaulay. "Dear Linda, when my sister passed away in her home of cancer, I was with her. Several friends were there also, so I went and sat down on the divan by the door to her office in my bedroom. I would say that about 10 minutes passed, and I saw a wisp of smoke race past me and go into her office. At the time, I knew it was her spirit. We had always said that whichever died first would let the other know if there was something else. And she did just that. That was a spirit, soul, or life force. Close quote. If the gray moving fog in my office was a past family member, it might have been my beloved cat Simba that I talked to you about in depth. He proved to me in December of 2016 he had a soul that survived death in a different dimension, and he came and showed me himself in that oval that had the glowing yellow, white, and blue light in it, and that he woke me up from a sound sleep, and that I jumped out of bed and I literally tried to grab him in this oval, this portal from some other dimension that was right in front of me. My arms came through, but I tried to grab him from the entropy of death. And Simba coming back the night of his mortal body death to show me that he was still alive in another dimension is one of the most important moments of my life. For me, the soul is the most important part of us on earth. It is a force. It is an archive of lives, recycling lives through infinity. And like photons of light that travel at 186,000 miles a second, their mass is infinite and time stops. The photons of light, and perhaps souls themselves, experience all of time as a single moment. Past, present, and future are one. And that is also what Albert Einstein said in his theory of relativity. Now I would like to share with you, as I did in Conscious Life Expo 3 days ago, just a few samplings of letters that I have received from people around the world about their own experiences with out of body from childhood onward. And sometimes it has involved smoke and wisps and going out of body. Here is an email to me from T.J. Calkins. Quote, "Hi Linda, I would like to give a brief description of what I experienced at age 5. My age now is 41. I am a white male, married 19 years, 2 kids, university graduate, stable career with a lower middle 6-figure salary. I do have clear memories of being lucid and finding myself floating down from the ceiling back into my body. I can say with confidence that I recall this occurring at least 3 times. I have no memory of traveling anywhere, as I would always become aware when I would be floating down from the ceiling very gently into my body. The only physical sensation that I can remember during each event was a tickling sensation in my abdomen as I was settling back into my body. I have never spoken of this to anyone. I had no idea that it was a phenomenon until I heard you reference it on your YouTube channel." Close quote. Here is a second letter from a female, Patty E. Quote, "I am 61 years old and a retired intensive care nurse. To be able finally to share my childhood experience with someone and to realize that others have had these experiences is a comfort. When I was 5 years old, I experienced death in the family after my aunt passed. And I asked my dad about the soul and dying, and he told me, quote, 'Well, it goes on to infinity.' And that means forever and ever, just like the universe, close quote. I couldn't stop thinking about infinity. I would lie in bed at night, contemplating it over and over in my mind until one night, I felt what seemed to be a huge rush of adrenaline come up from my stomach, and in a split millisecond, it was shot out of my body into space, and it seemed to me I became a part of the cosmos. I knew that I was only 5 years old, but in that instant, I realized that I was a consciousness that knew everything. Simultaneously, I also knew that my body was still in the bedroom, and I panicked in fear. The instant I felt fear, I was suddenly back in bed in my body. My heart was racing, and I remember that it took a long time to calm down. What is strange is that I was not scared once I was back inside my body, as one would think a 5-year-old should have been. I was ecstatic, but I was also sad that I was back in my body. Well, the following night, I wanted it to happen again. So I began contemplating an infinite universe as if I had the night before. Then I went out of body again, and it happened every night after that for about a year. I could make this happen. I could split in two, and part of me would rise away, and I knew the other part of me was lying in bed. And after a year, one night, it didn't happen. What is strange is that I knew that each time that I caused this to happen, each time I split in two, that there was a chance that I might not be able to return my out of body back into my body. Here's a third. This is from a male, or from a female. Hi, Linda. I've only related this story once in my life to another person. I was a very small child, less than 5 years old. What my family said they saw while I was sleeping was a kind of mist and fog, and it surrounded me. I've experienced myself in a dream as a misty or smoky haze floating to a destination somewhere. The mist or smoke is not shaped like my body. It is completely dissociated from my physical being. But I was conscious of myself as a mist or a hazy blob, and of my surroundings. I was in a soul spirit hazy blob state. And then when I was about 8 years old, during an appendix surgery, because my appendix had burst, the surgeons had opened my abdominal cavity and spent many hours cleaning and repairing me. So I was on the operating table under anesthesia for an extended time. I began to become conscious, and I came out of the anesthetic while my abdomen was still splayed wide open. And then my soul spirit left my physical body, and I floated or flew to the ceiling. I remember I had a clear view of the operating room from the ceiling. And then a round hole or portal opened up through the ceiling, and I could see a beautiful scene of a field of multicolored flowers in the brightest light that you could imagine. And what was most profound to me was I did experience the most exuberant feeling of joy associated with this flower place that I could see on the other side of the ceiling in the operating room. I felt like it had been a long time since I had known that joy, and I wanted to go there through the hole in the ceiling. And then I saw my body lying on the surgery table, and I saw the surgical team surrounding my abdomen that was wide open. I heard the surgeon say to the anesthesiologist, quote, "She's waking up. We're about finished. So just keep her under as much as you can for just a little while longer," close quote. It was at that time that I felt my soul essence being sucked back into my body. I fought as hard as I could to get through the hole in the ceiling to that joyful, bright light place before being forced to go back into my body. Linda, what forced me back? What are we forced back by? By what? I feel like this experience was so profound to me that it must have been more of a near-death experience than just simply an out-of-body, although I do believe it was a bit of both. I did not feel that I was a mist or spirit wisp in an earth out-of-body. I felt that I was a clear, invisible, pure consciousness headed for another dimension. And it was not a dark tunnel with a light at the end. It was just a hole, a portal in the ceiling. And as I read that, I was thinking of that night when Simba came back and woke me up, and there was that portal with all of the light around it, and me jumping, trying to grab him in that portal. And now I would like to share one, this would be the fourth letter of about 500. But this one, I thought, from a man named Carlos, had some extraordinary pieces that all of us can share, and hopefully this might provoke also more in you to share with me, and that we can keep this dialogue going about what may be a part of us that is trying to teach us that we do have a powerful soul. Linda, I recently saw one of your Earthfiles broadcasts, and I was so happy that I'm not the only one that feels out of place due to my experiences as a child and as an adult going out of body. Starting from about age 5 up to the age of 11 or so, I recall waking up at night many times and feeling a sensation of weightlessness. My sister and I shared bunk beds. I slept on the bottom bed, and my sister's top bed was lined with a satin lining, and it went all the way around that bed, and it hung about 5 inches from around her mattress, from her whole mattress, and I started waking up with a satin lining close to my face. I didn't understand how could that be, because it was at least 4 feet above me every night when I went to bed, hanging above me around my sister's mattress. And then I would try to reach up to push the satin lining away from my face, that I was so confused. Why is it there? And my hand went right through it. I tried again and again to touch the satin lining, to move it from my face, only a couple of inches away. But I could not touch it because my hand kept going through it. As a child, I never really felt fear of this. At that moment, I didn't feel panic. I was just intrigued that I could not touch this satin lining right in my face. But I never told my sister, my parents. I said nothing to anyone. Later, around age 25, I started meditating after my martial arts workouts. On one of these times after my meditation, I laid back on the carpet of my living room and I closed my eyes. And then, in my mind's eye, I began to see what I could only describe as a white fog or cloud beginning to form. As it grew bigger and expanded, I began to feel paralyzed. First, my mouth and throat, and then my arms, and finally my legs. And then I felt a great panic come over me. I tried calling out to my girlfriend at the time, who was in the bedroom, but I could not speak. I could not make a single sound. I couldn't even choke. I couldn't make a choking sound. I literally thought I was going to die. And then I felt something I've never felt before. My skin is crawling even now as I type this to you. A force, dark and heavy, was filling up the room. I felt I was being swallowed up by something so evil and did not think I was going to get out of this one alive. Linda, I have never been religious in the sense that I have never practiced any teachings from any of the common religious institutions. But I am very spiritual and love to find connections between science and what we know as spirituality. When this darkness was happening to me and the paralysis, and I reached a point that I knew I was going to die, this thought came into my mind. Just say the name of God. I thought, but I'm a man of science, and I don't believe in a single entity creator. But my mother was a die-hard religious person who read the Bible every day with me growing up until we read the entire book, and then she would have us start all over again from the beginning. So by age 21, I studied religion in college to know its origins. And that's when I learned these many names of God, such as Yahweh, which is also Jehovah. In total panic and not being able to speak, I finally thought the name Jehovah as loud as I could in my mind. Incredibly, at that instant, I began to feel a release. And the more I shouted in my mind, the name in my mind, the more release I felt until I could finally move and breathe again. The room also changed from that hazy dark to its natural color. I was in complete shock. I learned that I knew nothing about my existence. And after that, my hunger for knowledge was born. In the 500 letters that I have gone through so far, what impresses me is that all of these people, and you and me, never have felt comfortable sharing these extraordinary experiences with anybody, and yet, if we are able in our mind, without even physically being able to utter a sound, if we would know growing up that the power of thought, the power of concentration on light, the power of concentration on certain frequency names could be protection our entire life, maybe it could change this whole planet. This particular letter was extremely strong, and he went on to also tell about a vivid dream that involved entities who came and talked to him also about the fact that there was contemplation at some dimensional realm in which he was seeing these entities in what he called a vivid dream. And their discussion between the beings with him present was about whether or not they should destroy this universe in order to reset it and start another universe over, having learned from what went wrong in this universe. And that there was a decision that there should be a reset. He stresses this is a dream, but it raises for me the themes that come up in the human abduction syndrome. and all of these interviews that I have done where people also talk about entities that might have a relationship to, let's say, our source origin of manipulation of DNA and already evolving primates to create Homo sapien. That there may be that the manipulators of DNA also have goals that relate to the evolution of this universe, their own evolution in this matter world, and that the soul is the highest value. And this theme that keeps coming up, whether it's in the abductions or in these letters about out of body, that this part of us, the soul, that a lot of us have not been taught to recognize, could be what is going out of body because it is an exercise that is necessary to get strong and evolve in this particular matter universe. And that a divine field looks at this universe as a training ground for souls. And that is why there would be dark and light. And that if out of body, if the wisps and the smokes are related to the presence of souls that can generate a frequency, like my dear cat Simba, like the girl on the surgery operating table who saw a hole open up in the ceiling and felt that part of her wanted to go through it, as I wanted to grab Simba in that portal. That maybe it is these processes when we are small children and no parent and no teacher has been involved, that this is a natural process having to do with the evolution and the training and the teaching of the soul going in and out of matter and matter bodies as it goes in and out of other dimensional existences. If that is true, then our being able to talk with each other on the Earthfiles YouTube channel about going out of body, about transforming into light, about seeing misty, smoky fogs around the times of passing of loved ones or family or pets, of being able to talk honestly about vivid dreams in which there could be entities arguing about whether or not the universe should be reset, and struggling always to understand what our relationship in the matter world is to that which often is in the unseen until it does appear before us. And that in being able to see some foggy mist, and maybe even being able to say in our thought voice as loud as possible, hello, I see you, I recognize you, and I'm not afraid. Maybe that is part of the education that this planet must go through for us to have a reset that is in energy and is in knowledge and is in consciousness, not in destruction. And on that tonight, I would like to transition to Lori for any comments and questions that you all might have, and that I wish that we could all see each other and we could all embrace each other, because at Conscious Life Expo, after the presentation that I did in that room, everybody was hugging everybody else. Lori.
Linda, the chat has been full of other people also sharing their experiences.
Oh, I'm so glad.
That's been nice to hear. And we have only 2 questions for you tonight. The first one is, does Linda think that some people are my lab abductees because they are empathic and can communicate with beings that others can't?
That is an excellent question, and that fits in to this issue of our government looking for what they call antenna people. Think of an antenna on the radio or antenna that will receive and send. And on March 14th, John Burroughs and I on Phenomena Radio, where we are co-hosts together, our guest is going to be Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan of the Nolan Institute at Stanford University. One of our subjects is going to be looking for antenna people and looking for antenna through genes and gene analysis. And your question goes right to the heart of this question of going back to the 50s. There are so many people over the last few decades who have told me that when they were in school, that there might be quote unquote a contest, and a man in a dark suit would come and some of the children would be asked to look at slides, and the images would get faster and faster, and the man in the suit just said, "Don't worry, just tell me if you can continue to see what is in the slides," and they would get faster and faster. And one man who told me he quote unquote won the contest is that he was able, and he didn't know how, he was able to keep telling what it was even though the slides got faster and faster. He was an antenna. And in the search, as it has been described to me, and what I think some of the genetic investigations, it's called cognitive anomalies. Those are the words that geneticists are looking for, cognitive anomalies. Depending upon your gene structure, depending upon these certain parts of the brain, there is one particular area that in the research I was quoting just a little bit from, when you go into it more deeply, you will find there is an area in the brain that if an electrode is sparked in certain people, they will feel weightlessness. In a few cases, they will even begin to feel like they are separating. So something of this cognitive anomaly is in certain brains. And studying that is becoming a fascinating area of DNA and genetic research. Now, cognitive anomaly does not necessarily immediately correlate to, let's say, a human abduction experience that is described. They might be related or might not be. But the idea of the question that going back from the 50s up to today, that there would be agencies in our government who would know that we were dealing with other intelligences and probably other dimensions. They would want translators of telepathic thought, translators of binary code, translators of hieroglyphs, if possible, that come in and out of some people's minds. So the antenna and the cognitive anomaly and our brains being sensitive to materials and energies that we're not normally taught also ties into brand new research that I'm going to be doing an Earthfiles.com report about. Brand new research is showing that in some brains there are, I'm going to say, I think Stuart Hemmeroff would say that there are tubules. It seems that it's even gone beyond the tubules, that there are parts of the brain that may actually be sensitive to the frequency of light. And I'm not talking about the pineal. It may be very sensitive to light, but that the brain, if the brain, which we have never understood, would have an interaction with photon energy, and we're just finally discovering it, this could be a really exciting breakthrough. So thank you for that question, and that the whole issue of looking for antenna, looking for people who have certain resonance that can pick up certain frequencies, and the tests that will continue going into cognitive anomalies. I will keep trying to bring as much new research as possible to my YouTube channel, to my Earthfiles.com reports, and this show that we're going to do on Phenomena Radio March 14th with Dr. Gary Nolan. This will be some of what we'll be talking about then. So thank you. And Lori, what about one last question?
You got it. And I also want to thank all of our new subscribers tonight too.
Oh, yes. Thank you for helping us. Oh, it will be like some kind of for me, it will be like a mark where you wanted to fill a room with people that wanted to share this information. And getting to 100,000 and going over, it feels like our room will become more and more and more energetic, and that our dialogue will become more and more faceted. So thank you. Hopefully we'll make that 100,000 mark very soon. So Lori, go ahead with that question.
You've got it. Linda, have you ever personally gone to a remote viewer to help you do journalistic research on something that you felt was being hidden?
Yes. In Earthfiles, going back, I believe the year is 2005. For those of you who are familiar with Earthfiles, if you go to my headlines page where I'm with the kitties up on top, and then you go to the right and you click on Archive, all of the nearly 3,000 reports that I have done since the fall of 1998 to this date and evolving, they're all there in chronological order. And if you go back to 2000, I'm pretty sure it's 2005, and you can do a search on the capital letters DRES. It was an acronym being used by the government. And there is an interview and a story that I did by going to a place in Utah. And the installation was on the outside, looked dilapidated, like it had once upon a time perhaps been a barracks or something. But I got there and got inside with a local resident who knew that something was going on involving military. And when I actually got to the back stairs, when I got behind the dilapidated look of the buildings, fresh, shiny locks, looking through windows, fresh, shiny appliances in the kitchens. These were being used. In the back, vibrant solar panels right behind what should have been some dilapidated place from the way it looked in the front. And right across from this effort to hide in plain sight something that was going on, across the road there was a huge field, and the locals had this story that a UFO had either crashed or landed in this field, and in ways that are not easy to even understand, that somehow either our government or something buried a large craft out in that field. There was no way to prove anything about that field. So I took that story that you can read all about this, you can see the remote viewers' sketches. I contacted Joe McMoneagle, who was still then very active. And I talked with his wife, not about what I was trying to find out. You just have a discussion. Could I hire your husband, Joe McMoneagle? And she would say, yes. Just send me a 3x5 card. You can put numbers on it. You can put your initials. And it goes into a process where there is no such thing as me writing about what it was I'm looking for. It's just an association of a card with me, and I'm the one who has the intent of the question. Well, in this report, Joe McMoneagle, when I got it back, it came through the mail, hard mail, with his sketch. He got out in the field that down low in it, like it had really been either it placed itself down or it had been dug down, was a huge craft, and that it was still there. So what was all of the effort across the road from that field to look like something that was dilapidated and run down on the outside, and behind the scenes everything was new and shiny? What were they monitoring? What were they doing in this field? It turned out that the ownership of that field, as I recall, was the federal government. So any change in the state of that land, it would have to change the ownership and the control by a federal agency. As far as I know to this day, that whatever was accessed by Joe McMoneagle, the very talented remote viewer, it could still be there. And this then raises the ante around this planet. How many technologies put in, crashed and buried, how many advanced technologies are hiding from us on the surface and are buried below ground? And one of them, I think for sure, is that huge black pyramid underground in Alaska. So the remote viewers, from my experience, interviewing Lynn Buchanan, who worked with Joe McMoneagle and Pat Price and that group working for the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency at the end of the 1980s, those guys were good. They were giving really accurate information on so many of their remote viewing tasks. And then you come to about, 10 years ago? There was a story, I think it was in the Washington Post, New York Times, that the Central Intelligence Agency was saying that they were no longer funding any of their remote viewing because it had never accomplished anything. The remote viewers I talked about that article said, that's just a deflective cover. We know what we found, we know what we reported, and it was extremely valuable to our government then. And remote viewers are working for our government now. And that's where Lynn Buchanan said with great confidence about his own remote viewing having to do with consciousness in this universe. Linda, this is a direct quote, Linda, the universe is teeming with life. Some of it is friendly to us, some of it is very unfriendly and could be called hostile, and a lot of it is neutral. And the allies help us, and the neutrals don't do anything, so all we have to ever be concerned about are the hostiles, and as long as we have allies and a large body of neutrals, those hostiles can be contained. And on that note tonight, I want to thank everybody for being here. I look forward to your emails, your hard letters, of anything that you have been provoked by tonight. And remember, anybody who asks you a question about Spartan 1 in my unfolding whistleblowers about Antarctica, that I was able to get the first-hand correction from Spartan 1 tonight, that he said I must have been nervous, but that I was a lieutenant commander SEAL in the United States Navy when I went to Antarctica in 2003, and I retired as a commander, Navy SEAL. I look forward to continuing to weave all of these fascinating subjects, and Brad and I will be working on part 3 to show you in March. And in the meantime, every Wednesday, whatever I keep getting in news, I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to share our dialogue with each other as much as I can. And next week, I'll try to have the cats. But I literally ran from the car, from the airport, to get this tonight. I love you.